And we're back with another episode of the New Stack Agents. This time, Zach Lloyd from Warp. Thank you so much for being here. And Alex Williams is still alive, which I wasn't sure about last week, Alex.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Jeez.
uh,
Nothing like getting a cold in Europe. Oh my gosh.
So we spent last week at the at the Open Source Summit. Felt, a lot of the old OpenStack folks were there, so it felt a little bit like that. But at the Open Source Summit EU in Amsterdam, and I think I saw Alex 2.5 out of the 5 days we were there because you were just
I wasn't doing so great,
no,
but I'm here.
I'm just glad you made it.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm alive and well. Hey, everyone out there. Hey, I just want to say one thing. We would love your questions. This is one of those discussions that really is for the engineers out there, with Zach talking about his experience that goes back to working on Google Sheets. And so if anyone's out there right now and has a question, please consider asking it. We'd love to hear from you. That's my little spiel.
That's your spiel, and I get to ask the questions first. So that's once we get audience questions, we'll bring those in. But Zach, thanks so much for being here. We first talked 2022 when you just launched, I think, if I remember that right.
That sounds right. Yep.
Yeah, and I think you had just raised some funding. But at the time, I think my first question was, and for those who don't know, or maybe just explain that for a second as well, but my first question to you was, why another terminal?
Yep.
But before you answer that question, Zach, let's see your cowboy hat. Let's
you want the full getup?
Yeah.
I'll explain why I'm wearing this.
That's awesome.
No, at this point,
this isn't my normal. This isn't what I wear to work every day. This is my cowboy look.
The Warp Ranch, where you do your best work.
So when we first spoke, we were like, we started off trying to build a better terminal. It's kind of the short of it. The like general idea behind Warp at the outset was that there's this tool that is one of the two main tools that developers live in. It's, I think it's the terminal and the code editor. I think that there had been a sort of, I'd seen a lot of enterprise apps or like productivity apps kind of have their experiences improved. Everything from like, I think Zoom was like a huge improvement over WebEx, and Slack was a big improvement over HipChat or whatever came before it. And I was looking at tools that I regularly used as a developer and was like, why does the terminal work this way? And it's a super powerful tool if you learn to use it well. Like a lot of the best developers I ever worked with just knew how to like do stuff with it that I couldn't do, or just like never actually. I was like kind of lazy. I never like learned how to fully like master it. And I was like, why is this power locked in such a old, antiquated interface? And if you looked at the workflows developers do in the terminal, like, can we build something that makes those workflows easier? Can we make it feel more like a modern app? Can we make the mouse work? Can we make copy paste work? And so, we started the company. It was just like, let's build the product that we thought would be most useful, or that I thought would be most useful here. And I didn't think it would look like, the 40-year-old terminal. And so it was meant to be something very different. And the business model at that point was something totally different than what it is today. Like this was pre AI. The business model that we sort of planned on building out, which we actually, there have some traction on, is much more of a collaboration platform around doing things in the command line. And this goes back to sort of, my background, which I don't know if we'll talk about it or not, but I used to be the engineering lead and a principal engineer on Google Sheets and Google Docs. And like we thought there would be a way of making sort of collaborative and team workflows work better in the command line. And then when, AI came along And even before ChatGPT, we'd start putting AI features into Warp, but that's totally transformed not just the business model, but what the app actually is at this point. Like we don't even call it a terminal anymore. It's really a platform for developing with agents that happens to have a form factor that looks a lot like a terminal, and you can still use it as a terminal, but now it's an agentic development environment. And like to call it a terminal creates like a set of expectations around what it is and what it does, which don't match what the product actually is today.
I'm really curious about that time at Google and what you learned there and how it influenced the development for Warp. And like, we have so many engineers out there who are dealing with software like from Google or from Microsoft, and they have to fit it into their entire enterprise stack. And now AI comes along, and it makes things easier to some extent, but it also adds some complexities and complications. And how AI fits into the overall stack is a big question, especially with the way Linux distributions are set up, right? They're very much layered. And so you have all these different APIs, all these different issues. So I'm curious on how that work at Google influenced Warp in its current direction.
Yeah. So when you're working at Google and you're building a product like Google Sheets or Google Docs, like you're building it for scale is one thing, and you're building it for quality. It's, if you work on any Google product, it's going to be used at a minimum by millions and more likely by tens, hundreds of millions, or I think Google Docs now has 1 billion users. And so the type of engineering that you do to build something like that, it's like you have to build it so that it can support that type of load. And so that means like it's got to be sort of horizontally scalable on the server side. It means that you have to have a pretty rigorous process around QAing it. It has to work in 40 different languages or more. It has to support bidirectional layout. It has like enterprise customers who have requirements around data privacy, security, and the thing working offline. And so it just creates like, kind of like a heavyweight engineering mindset where you do a lot of like upfront work to make sure the design of the thing is right before you build it. At Warp, I think we've like carried over. It's like you can't really do that at a startup. Like at a startup, the problem is not building for scale so much. The problem is building for speed and wanting to make sure you build something useful that people are going to find value in. However, I think, are different from most startups in that we did pick a long-term way of building Warp from the start. So Warp is built in Rust, which is not at all the fastest way to get a product to market. It's built with
but it makes
custom
the product fast, right?
It's built with a custom UI framework, and we do all the rendering all the way up to through like it's all GPU accelerated. We have all the shader code, our own UI framework. And so we built this all, actually we built it before AI existed. So it's all built by hand, although that's not how we're building it now in large part. So I guess the lessons from Google Docs to me were like, pick what's important for building it right so that we can build something that will eventually scale. But we also, you have to make some trade-offs in terms of working at a startup where you build some aspects for speed.
One thing I thought was interesting was you were talking kind of about the multiplayer aspect of kind of early Warp, right?
Yeah.
And I talked to Nathan Sobo from Zed, the editor, just last week, Nathan. I think, or the week before, who you said worked at Warp for a moment as well. So
yeah, Nathan was at Warp for a few months very early on before he went to go found Zed.
But that makes sense because Zed also written in Rust, obviously. But anyway, the connection was he was also telling me how he wrote Zed as a multiplayer editor, and that helped him now in adding agents into the mix because it was the agent basically becomes another player. Is that how you thought of it as well when you started adding agent features into Warp?
So Not exactly. And like, I think from product perspective, sort of like anthropomorphizing the agent and having it use the same interface tools that a human uses is not the approach I think makes the most sense, honestly, in most use cases. Like, agents are really, really good at taking in text, reasoning on that text, and outputting text. And agents are less good at pushing buttons, using menus, like doing the things that human users of an interface use. And so this is one of the reasons I'm not like super bullish on computer use as being like a agent paradigm that makes a ton of sense. It's just like it's taking the thing that was built for a human and then trying to give it to a computer program that can run 10 to 100 times faster and is like oriented around a whole different modality of taking in data and putting it out. So that's not actually how we built like the agent interaction in Warp. The agent interaction in Warp actually fits much more with the paradigm of using the terminal, which I think makes a lot of sense. And so the kind of key thing from a product standpoint that we've done is like, we realized that, well, okay, what do you want if you're working with agents as a developer? You want the ability to like prompt them. You want the ability to attach context. You want to see a log of what they're doing. You want to be able to run multiple of them in parallel, and you want them to have like the ability to do like tool calls in a way that makes sense for the agent. And so the insight that we had is like, okay, launching an agent is very, very similar to like running a terminal command. And a terminal command can be like a one-off thing that you run and get a response to, or it can be something that's more like a long-running process. And so, you know, we just made it so that the primary way you interact with a terminal is no longer just running commands. It's like telling your computer what to do in English or command. And most of the same interface that works that we were already improving for like improving the terminal interaction works super duper well for an agent interaction. So it's a little bit of a different approach.
How is the terminal changing in your view with, you know, the age of agentic AI? I read a little bit about how it's kind of helping the terminal actually be much more useful. I'm curious in your take on that.
Yeah, so I think AI plus the terminal is like the perfect fit. So the traditional product problem with using the terminal is that you have to remember a gajillion complicated commands. So it's like an infinitely powerful interface in the sense of like, you can have a command that has any number of options and flags and can do anything.
Right.
But you as the human operator of that command have to speak in terminal language or shell language, whatever you want to call it, in order to invoke it. And like, that's annoying. And so the terminal has like traditionally, like you have things like autocomplete and history search and man pages and grep and all this stuff to like try to get good at using it. But what AI has done is has made it so you just have to express your intent in English, which is way easier. And the agent can take that intent and walk you through doing a terminal task. And it can do it in multiple steps. It can come up, it like basically knows every command that exists. If it doesn't know commands that are internal to like your organization, it can learn them. And so it's just made all of that power way, way, way more accessible. So it's a great combination.
Interesting.
I'm thinking about how this came to be, because I remember when I used the early versions of Warp, but then you started adding a little bit of AI to it, right? In those early versions, it didn't feel like an agent yet necessarily, right? It was more co-pilot-y.
So yeah, the stages that we went through. So even before ChatGPT, we used to use Codex, which was the thing that originally drove GitHub Copilot. And the first AI feature we had was something where you could like you could type the hash key, and then you could type a sentence in English, and it did English to command translation. And that's like the most basic thing. That's like kind of like literal translation of your English, like find me all files in this directory matching this string, and it would do like, find dash name or whatever. And that worked. It was cool, but it doesn't raise the abstraction layer, and it certainly doesn't turn the terminal into an agent. The next thing that we did was what I think a lot of apps did when ChatGPT came out, which was like we put a chat panel in Warp, and we made it like easy to like attach a terminal output into the chat panel. And like, that was fine, but that's like very much a bolt-on solution and not an agent, in my opinion. Like, you can't really have an agent running in a chat panel. Like, an agent needs to be like the primary thing the app is doing. And so we realized we had that experience, I don't know, for like 3 to 6 months, something like that. We're like, okay, there's actually a way better, more powerful way of doing this, which is to just straight up use the exact same input that people are using for terminal commands to run the agent. And then that unlocks like a gajillion things where you have like the ability to have multiple agents running. You get agents able to execute terminal commands to gather context. Agents can execute coding tools. And so it's just like that paradigm shift is what has turned Warp into an agent platform rather than just being like a terminal with like AI in a chat panel, which is kind of, a phase we went through.
And though a lot of users are still just using it as a terminal as well, right? I think I saw something in your blog post about.
Yeah. So if you look at like, yeah, exactly. So we have, I think like 700,000 developers using Warp now. And, a lot of them have started using Warp before there was a single AI feature in Warp because they like the terminal features. And that's totally cool. Like, there's a single button in Warp if you want to turn off AI. I think you're missing out if you're doing that. And I think, but it's like developers have their own preferences and want to get the most value out of their tools in their own ways. And I'm like very much in favor of that. But that's changing over time. So if you look on like a cohort basis of people who come into Warp, the majority of people who are coming into Warp now are using it agentically and not as much as a terminal. So I expect like the overall composition of our user base to change gradually over time with like a much higher propensity to do, sort of be like agent first, or for people who are coming in to Warp new.
Got it. Now one more, sorry, just to go back one step.
Yeah.
You mentioned multiple agents working.
Yeah. I was going to ask about that.
And that's something I've heard, but often the problem is that the one agent doesn't necessarily know what the other agent is doing, and what does it look like right now? And how do you think about the interaction between them?
Yeah, so I think we're still early stages of like really, really effective multi-agent development. The way it works in Warp today is that it's just sort of like roughly like one terminal session is a container for an agent. And so you can, just like you can run, multiple terminal sessions in a single terminal, you can run multiple agents in Warp just by splitting off new panes or new tabs or new windows. And that's its own agent container, its own conversation context. If you wanted to effectively write code on the same code base, you either have to have multiple clones of repo or something like Git work trees to do it. And the agents still basically have their own contexts. Now, I think this is going to change where what you want is something more like agents sharing context and having the ability to coordinate with each other and have like, a swarm of agents that are working on a task together. You see that a little bit with like some concepts of sub agents and splitting off agents and coordinating them. I think the right paradigm for this is still TBD. Like Google has a sort of protocol around this. I think it's called it's like the agent to agent protocol.
Agent to agent, A2A.
Yeah. So we're still exploring this, but we will definitely build something here because we're seeing a very common work pattern now where people you don't want to just like sit there, watch one agent do its work. You want to, as a developer, get good at multitasking, multi-threading yourself, running multiple agents. So we'll build something here. It's super interesting.
What's the influence of, for instance, container technologies on the work that you do? The influence of cloud native technologies. And
Yes.
is there a good fit there?
Yeah, I think there is a really good fit. So the thing that's nice about a container solution is that you can basically give an agent like a hermetic environment and like basically a sandbox for the agent to work in. And so again, you can use like some of the earlier primitives of the terminal to make this work. So you can like SSH into either a remote machine or a container, and you can, again, because of how Warp's built, it will basically turn that into a like what we call a warpified session. So you'll get something that like has all the capabilities of Warp's agent, but that agent can run inside of like Docker or some remote machine. There's some limitations that we have at the moment that we're fixing around like ability to do like complex coding tasks and have all of the tools available for an agent inside a container. But I think like agents plus containers makes a ton of sense for like sandboxing different types of like, especially like development workflows.
Yeah, I was just wondering too, because you were mentioning, how you're starting to see the emergence of sub-agents, for instance. Does every agent need its own container?
So I think again, people work in different ways. I think today, the most common workflow that I see is developers doing local development with multiple agents across multiple repos or Git work trees. I think that in the future, you will see more of like, let me spin up an agent in a container on a cloud. And some people are doing this already, just to be clear, but like it's not nearly as common. And so if you do that, then you're going to need some sort of like context sharing mechanism across these different containers if the agents need to share context. I think another thing that you're going to see, and that we're also working on at Warp, is the ability to have the agent decoupled from the app. Meaning, like right now in Warp, it's very much an interactive agent where you prompt it and then it goes off and does something, but you watch it do it. I think it makes, we have now something that we just launched to our preview community where it's like you can get a headless version of our agent and you can run it on a remote machine. And that has all sorts of advantages of like running it in containers and like not having to be tied to like the user interface to get the benefits of like the agent solving problems or writing code or doing checks in CI, that kind of thing.
Is that your version of a async agent, basically, that, some others, Claude or something, Anthropic does that with integrations?
Yeah, like it's basically a programmable agent. So it's like, it's very, very general purpose today. And so, you can, the API that we have on it today is something like, you could use it very easily to be like, in terms of like, you could put it in CI, you could install it, and you could prompt it to be like, look at this PR and, look for common patterns of errors in our code base and like add PR comments using the GitHub CLI. And it could do all of this stuff for you because it has all of those tools. You could also run multiple, like you could program against it locally. So you could have like a local cron job that says every hour run my Warp agent and clean up all of the old files that have accumulated from all of my cargo builds or something. So it's super general purpose to have an agent harness like this. And the cool thing about it is like it has all of the tools that Warp's agent has and has all of the context. It's like it has all of your MCP servers, it has all of your Warp drive context. And so I do think that like programming these agents or putting them on triggers or having them do background stuff is going to be increasingly powerful way that people use them, rather than just like sitting there typing into them and watching them work.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's kind of the dream, right? To just send them off and do some work and come back later on. How are people using those agents today, though, for the most part? What's the canonical use case? Is it kind of like a Claude Code where you program or?
So how are they using the remote agents or just like Warp's general agents?
Just in general, yeah.
Yeah, so Warp's a very, very general purpose development agent. One of the things that distinguishes us from things like Cursor or Claude Code is that it works across the full life cycle. So, you can tell Warp to set up a new stack for you. You can, once you have that stack set up and you're in that repo, you can tell Warp to write the code for you. And then once the code is written, you can tell Warp to deploy it. And then when you have crashes in production, you can tell Warp to investigate them. Warp, I think, naturally draws a lot of people to the parts of the life cycle that are not as well covered by things like Cursor or Claude Code, because those, like, you think like, okay, code generation tools, and Warp, you might think like terminal tool first. And so you do see a lot of people using it for like, help me set up Terraform for this, or help me like fix this crazy Kubernetes thing I'm seeing, or help me like set up this Linux distribution, or because you just think as a developer, okay, like that's a terminal-ish thing to do.
Yeah.
But the truth is Warp is like striving to be a tool that you can use for all aspects of without having to context switch. And so it's really, really excellent at coding. Like if you look at the public benchmarks, we're top 3 on SweBench, which is the top coding one. We have been top 1 on Terminal Bench. I've been told someone today just like submitted something on the day of our launch to get above us on Terminal Bench, but we'll get to the top, back to the top of that. So it's a really, really high quality agent that you can use for all kinds of development tasks. And so, we do see people, everyone, like, I think like 20% of our users are vibe coders who don't even know how to, really code. It's primarily still a professional audience, but like we see a lot of different use cases with it.
I'm curious about the philosophical shift that you've experienced with the work you're doing on the terminal and how it's affected your work. In the video you did where you're on a horse and, there's lots of people in similar garb that you're wearing now, right?
Yeah.
You talk a little bit about this, and it's interesting for me because we hear a lot about how AI augments work in some respects, but that does then shape the community a lot differently than it had been before, right? The community had been shaped historically by just legions of developers, working on, on coding projects. Today, it's changing a lot. I'm curious on how you see that change and what's your philosophical view about that in the terminal and how we think about the work that we do.
Yeah, I think of it primarily as where we're at today is that a developer works in like a tight loop with an agent on a problem and then pushes a PR, and everything is pretty similar after that, honestly. So I still think like if you're working on a project or a team, it's mostly like an individual speed up or power boost in the parts of development that are prior to someone else on your team looking at the work you're doing. That's like what I see. And that's really kind of like, that just means like individuals can be pushing more PRs. But it doesn't, at least like I'll just speak for Warp as like a software development team. Like everyone's still as individuals responsible for the code that they're asking other people on the team to review. They still are like getting code reviews from other humans in the exact same way that they've been doing it before. It's just like when I go to start working on some coding task, I tend to start it by prompting the agent to help me understand how I should do the task. I tend to work with the agent to come up with a plan, and then I tell the agent what I want it to do. And then I personally review the agent's code before I attach my name to it and ask someone else on my team to review it. That's like the flow that I see today. And the way that, I think that the way to improve that flow, and actually the problems with that flow, I don't know if you asked this, but I'll say it, is like, if you look at like the Stack Overflow survey of like how people use agents, and what the number one complaint is that you have agents writing a bunch of code that they don't understand, that has subtle bugs, that they're scared to push up for code review, that they're scared to get introduced a security hole. And so what you actually need to make this workflow more effective right now, at least, are tools for like comprehending and guiding and making sure you as the engineer who's working with the agent can stand behind the code that you're asking someone else on your team to review. That's like where I think we're at right now.
Yeah, because the naysayers on Hacker News when it comes to this they'll often say, well, it's taken me longer to review this mediocre code that the agent has written for me than it would have taken me to build it, right? But are you saying they're not doing it right, or
I'm saying they're not doing it right. I'm saying they're not doing it right, and the tools aren't supporting the way to do it right, which is this was what our release on Warp today was all about, was like the right way to do it, in my opinion, is with today's level of model and intelligence, is you need to work really, really closely as the agent goes, and you need to tell the agent how to make the change and verify the agent is making the change in the way that you want it made. And the failure mode today is just telling an agent, I want you to build X feature. Here's some screenshots. I'm going to walk away, because what you're going to come back to, even in a really, really strong agent, whether it's Warp or Cloud Code or whatever, is you're going to come back to something where it's like, this looks kind of right. Maybe it's like when I run the app, it looks kind of right, but I don't understand what it did. It's not with our coding conventions. I don't understand the data flow. And so you then are in this weird position as a developer where, like, do I push this up and ask someone to review it? And I think that's a mistake. And so what you need in the tools today are like something that shows you the agent's work, the explanation the agent has at every single step that it goes. And to me, that is a solved problem almost. It looks like code review. It's just you want a human code reviewing the agent as it's writing the code, so you don't get into this position where you as the developer, like, what the hell did it do? And so that's yeah.
Can you explain what you present in that video? Because I think the UI takes you through this as you're describing it right now.
Yes. Yeah. So my what I show in the video, what Warp just launched today, is I think generally as a developer, when you're working, you're gonna want to be looking at two things. You're gonna be want to be looking at like one sort of like log of what an agent is doing, and one place where you're prompting it and asking it to work and get into a plan with it. And then next to that, you're going to want to be looking at like, what's the work the agent has done so far,
right?
And why has it done it? And then you're going to notice as the agent is doing work that you either don't understand it, and you need it to explain to you, or that you see that it's wrong and you need to tell the agent to do it the right way. And even if you're really, really good at coding, you're going to find that saves you a tremendous amount of time if you get good at that like style of doing it. What you don't want to do, in my opinion, is just have a view that's like just the agent log going and doing things, and you come back at the end and are like, what did it do? Because I think it's just a recipe for causing lots of problems. Or slowing you down, just like losing the benefit, because like you're like, I don't know what it did.
Yeah, what does I'm just thinking about the rest of the announcements today. Maybe you can walk us through those as well, since it is launch day, right? It's
Sure. Yeah. So the main thing we launched is this ability to like really tightly like code review the agent's code. We also added a bunch of features that make it so you don't have to context switch. And so Warp it looks a little bit more like a code editor, although we are really not trying to build a code editor, but it has like a file tree. Because, I think if you're working in a project, we get this feedback all the time. It's like, I'm doing coding in Warp. I need to understand the structure of my project. It has it has a file editor, which again is not a primary interface in Warp, but it's enough of a file editor so that you have the ability to quickly change and edit an agent generated diff which is what you really want. So it's like, you don't want to have to context switch. And like, I think what people are doing today is they'll do like a quarter of their work or half their work in like a terminal app, a terminal CLI app. Then they'll switch to a code editor. They'll have to find where the edits were, and then they'll have to type in the edits, and they'll switch back to the terminal. It's like, no, what you really want is the ability within one app that's built for an agentic workflow to just like make quick edits of what the agent is doing. We also added the ability so that as the agent is running, you don't have to kill the agent to redirect it. So this is like, we call it like our persistent input. So that's a nice feature that lets you like steer it as it goes. We added something which other tools already support, so we're not new in this, but the ability to like have project-based rule files. So you can have a warp.md file, or you can use agents.md, which is the standard one, or cloud.md.
Kind of a
and
spec
then
file almost.
Yeah, kind of a spec thing. And so lots of stuff like that, so that when you're coding in Warp, you get this really, really good feedback loop with the agent and can keep it on track all the way up to the point where you feel like this is a change that I understand, that's tested, that I can like send up to someone to review.
The steering part is super interesting to me, because I've sat there and I saw the agent just do things. I'm like, don't do that. This
Go
should
in
be
circles.
different.
Yeah.
But then I have to either stop the whole thing and start it again. But that's not what you're doing, right? How are you doing that technically to re-steer the agent in the middle?
It's pretty cool. So the agent, the way that we've built it is it maintains an internal task list, right? Which is like a set of steps that it thinks it needs to do to complete whatever your prompt was. And as it's going, it's completing, it's like checking off things on the task list. And so what we do when you steer it is that we temporarily pause it and have it adjust the task list in light of the new instruction, and then go back to completing the task. And so that's like, it's like it knows what it's doing at some higher level than just that initial prompt and what it's done. So that is, a way that you can sort of like add on to what it has to do, or like change its direction.
That's interesting, because that gets to questions about persistent context, doesn't it? And memory, and how, terminals have traditionally been stateless. And these new terminals are maintain that persistent context. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what complications that brings in terms of your own architecture?
Yeah, so there is complication around this. So typically a terminal session does have state. And so we've always had issues with this, where it's like if someone sets like an environment variable or whatever, that sets it for the lifetime of the terminal session, right? And then agent conversations also kind of have state. And so, what we're trying to do is find a way so that if you are like doing some amount of work right now and you have to like step away or quit Warp, or want to like pick up that work someplace else, you can do it. Right now, we do that by sort of persisting as much as we can in like a local database, essentially. So SQLite, where if you quit Warp and restart it, we try to get you back to the state that you were in. It's imperfect because like a terminal session is not a serializable thing. Essentially, it's like you can't serialize like you can, and then bring it back. But an agent conversation basically is. And so all of the LLM APIs are totally stateless. And so what we do is, if you quit Warp and reopen it, we basically can rebuild exactly what your context was up to that point, modulo any things that we've had to do to like compact the context if it's exceeded the context window, that type of thing.
One thing we haven't talked about yet is what actually powers the agent, right? Is that what kind of models are you using, and how are you thinking about the choice there as well?
Yeah, this is something we're constantly tweaking. So the product philosophy is like just give users the most powerful model by default, whatever that is today, and that's changing very frequently. when a new model comes out and it's something that we want to like contemplate either putting in Warp or making the default in Warp, because most people will keep it as the default. About 20% of people will switch it, and we let people pick a model. We basically run all the public benchmarks against it with Warp's harness, and then we run a whole set of like internal evals that we've made, and we basically try and do it like a quantified approach. We'll also do some stuff just like where we use it internally, and maybe we put it on our preview build and get qualitative feedback as well. But my sense is it's pretty measurable, the quality of these different models at this point. So we just try to give the best one that we can. And we also are using different. Sorry, go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
I would say we also use different models for different things. So like we have one model which drives like the main agent, but there's a bunch of different features in Warp that are LLM powered, where it makes more sense to use either like a slower but like higher reasoning model, like maybe at the moment that you're coming up with a plan, or like a faster, lower latency model. Like we have this feature that we just launched that's really cool, where if we see a compiler error, we'll try to have the model fix it for you. Like, and you can just like one click accept that. And that's, latency really, really matters there. So it's like, you can't like kick off a very like slow agent process to do that. So we use different models for different things.
At some point you have to explain why you're wearing the Western garb and the hat. Where did that come from?
So the theme of the launch, it's really stupid.
You got to put your hat on. You got to put your hat on to do this.
I feel bad. I should have a hat on at this point. I don't have any.
The theme of the launch is Code on Warp, which is COW, C-O-W. And we were talking about like what would be like funny, honestly, or what would be like memorable. Because like when you look at I don't know, every other launch for one of our competitors, we've done this too, it's usually like some tech person in an office, like, sitting on like a, set of stairs or like a nice chair, like explaining what their what the new features are. And we're like, I don't know, I thought it'd be kind of fun to just do it on a horse. And so that was like, where like people will probably notice that, first of all. And there's so many releases in our space, like we're like, what would people notice and think is like memorable? And so then we're like, why not also make a Western ad? And so this is like where we're at. And like,
what was the horse's name? Cody?
It was not Cody. What the heck was it? It was like Stringer or something like that. It was the horse. And you can see me on the horse. I'm not loving being on the horse. I'm not riding horses all the time.
So at first I thought you were using AI to do that.
No, I was literally on a horse. We did this in like a little like Western town set outside of LA. And we had extras on the set walking around. I don't know. It was fun. I dug it.
I need to raise more funding before we can do that, I think, here.
We need to get some
totally
horses.
Crazy, but
yeah,
like we are. Now we're growing our revenue super fast, and so I do feel like we're at a moment where we have an awesome product, and part of the game of being a startup in our space right now is like, how do you get people to notice and try it? And so I don't know, it's not like a thing that is like I've been doing cowboy ads my whole life. It kind of goes against like a lot of like, my instincts, but I'm like, screw it. Let's just try it. And I'm down to be on a horse. Why not? It's fun. Like,
instead of a conference, you should have a rodeo.
We should do a rodeo. Why not? I'm taking the hat off.
There you go. Maybe final question, but you kind of hinted at it. You're growing your revenue. I think to some degree, AI did open up new ways for you to create revenue as well, right? Because it's easier to charge for an AI tool than for a terminal, I would guess.
100%. Like, yeah, I think that there was value in what we were building before, just from the extent of it being a a very, very useful product for people. But it was useful in terms of like, this is a much nicer app. I think it was going to be hard to monetize just based on that. But when you add in, you know, the agent functionality and some of the collaboration functionality, honestly, it's like you have a thing where it's like, you know, we get people writing us and they'll be like, hey, this thing that I would have taken me like 2 weeks to do, and I was hating my life trying to figure out how to do it, Warp figured out how to do it for me in like an hour. And so that's like a different type of value, you know, than like what you could provide by just making the interface of the terminal better. And so, yeah, it's really transformed. Like people will pay a lot for that, obviously. I think even what we charge and what not just unique to us, like compared to the value people get out of it, is like a crazy good deal for you know, how much more it can help you do. So I do think it's unlocked a ton of business opportunity for us.
So you're saying there'll be a Warp Pro code Pro for $200 a month or something?
There is a $200 a month, and a lot of people are paying for it. Yeah,
there you go. You gotta raise that.
And I think it's a great deal. Like we have people who are paying on the $200 a month plan, and they hit the limit, and then they pay us more because it's just like it's kind of transformational in terms of what it lets you do, which is cool.
Then how do you approach the enterprise market with something like this then?
Yeah, so the enterprise market is something that I think is eventually going to be the biggest part of our business. Most enterprises, in my experience, as we talk to them, they're in a spot right now where they are trying to figure out what the hell to make of all of these different tools and like how best to deploy them. So a typical situation will be like, we'll go in and they'll be like, we're doing pilots of several tools. We're trying to figure out what is going to help our developers the most. They're trying to figure out how to measure the impact of these tools. And that's really hard. Like it's like it's not a solved problem of like, how do you measure developer productivity in general? And so, you know, they'll tend to just give a lot of weight to what the developers say, honestly. And so, you know, they'll survey the developers at the end and they'll be like, you know, what would you say your time savings were? They'll look at some statistics around, you know, sort of engagement and are the people using the tools and maybe how many lines of code are they writing with the tools. But that's like not a great proxy for actual productivity and like how much is it moving your business forward. So that's like one real challenge. And then, yeah, they're trying to figure out how do you get these tools to understand a company's internal context is probably the other really big thing that we, you know, come across a lot. And like it's just very early in terms of figuring out how to do that. So some places are going all in on MCP. Some places are, you know, building their own agents or their own like ways of providing agent context, or like they're running agents in their own development environments. We also see just some companies are way further along with the whole adoption of these tools than others. Like, you know, I was talking to a company today where it's like they're figuring out the first steps. And then I literally had a call right after that where they've built their own internal agent platform. And these are both big companies. And so, you know, they're trying to figure out how to deploy it. But across the board, there's definitely a huge appetite at the enterprise to figure out how do you make developers more productive? How do you automate parts of software development?
And then it comes down to the question of, is it actually making people more productive? Because there was the meter study, right, that seemed to imply that isn't really, you know.
I mean, this goes back to like what we're launching today, where I think there's like, you could very easily use these agents to do something that makes you feel more productive because it's like written a lot of code for you. And then it gets time to like, you know, send it for code review. And you're like, I don't know what it did and if it's right. And I need to understand it. And so, you know, I think the other thing, in order to make these agents more productive, again, it's not just like a model problem or even a product problem. It's also like a culture and like training and like skills problem of like, how do you teach folks to use them effectively? And so again, everyone's just, it's all changing so fast, but that's like the third aspect of it.
I always think of it as like, would you go back to the old way of doing it?
No, that's like
of
I
course
think is
not.
the answer. Yeah.
Yeah. How, just for you internally, because you said you're early on in the conversation, you said our way of writing software has changed. So you must definitely believe that it's speeding you up and helping.
Yeah.
you
So
be faster.
we at Warp have our own sort of, it's called like a mandate or like on how to use Warp to build Warp. We keep evolving it, but like the gist of it is we ask every engineer on the team to start every coding task with a prompt in Warp. We don't enforce that you finish the coding task with a prompt. If you can't finish it with a prompt, we ask that you share your prompt, share what you try to do. What went wrong? Was it a problem with the product that we could fix? Is there a way that it could have been prompted better? We have specific guidelines on how you prompt, which is that you should prompt by telling the agent how to build the feature. And we specifically avoid what I call outcome-based prompting, where it's just like, you just describe from the user perspective what you want built and have the agent do it, because it's too likely that you're not going to understand what you're doing at this point. And so we have all of these guidelines, and again, I wish we could measure. There are certain cases where it's super duper clear that it's adding a lot of value. So for instance, like we wrote like an admin app for Warp that's in React, that's a standalone web app from scratch. And like the engineer working on that is like, I'm never writing React code by hand again. Like this was just so much easier. And then there's things that we do in our Rust code base where it's much more ambiguous if it's saving us a lot of time or not. And so, yeah, that's how we're approaching it.
It's like any automation, really. I mean, it just is like eureka, it's like,
yeah.
I never forget when we were like, we work on we're a media company. We work on WordPress, right? And we have to put in disclosures because that's the law, right? You know? And we automated that. And it's like, oh my gosh, life has changed.
Yeah, automation's amazing. I agree. Yeah.
Well, I think we had a very productive conversation in the last almost hour. Was awesome. I really appreciate it, Zach. As always, thank you so much for being here. And next week we have Pat Casey, the CTO and co-founder of ServiceNow, who will join us for conversation on Wednesday at 11 o'clock as well. And maybe they have some news that day too. So.
Do you want to lead with any kind of cowboy slogan that you have, like "Hi ho, Stringer, away we go," or something like that?
Yeah, giddy up. Go try some of the new coding features in Warp. They're pretty awesome. But thank you both for having me. This was cool.
Thanks a lot.
All right, we'll ride our horses into the sunset.
There it is.
There you go.
All right.
Awesome.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks.